Hello and welcome to Asia Newsweek. I'm Yvonne Yong. Over the next half hour, I'll take you through the top stories in the region and go beyond the headlines for a deeper look at what's happening in Asia. First, to some big news out of Thailand. After a tumultuous week in politics, Parliament has decided on a new leader. Thaksin, who hadn't even served a full year as Prime Minister, was dismissed by the Constitutional Court over an ethics breach. Well, he's now being replaced by Paetongtarn Shinawatra, daughter of former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra. Let's find out more from Pravit, Rojanaphruk, senior reporter at Khaosod English. Now, Pravit, she has got the required number of votes in Parliament, and quite easily too.
Well, because she's the leader of the ruling party, but most importantly, she's the daughter of Thaksin Shinawatra. Thaksin, the former prime minister, is still arguably the most influential political figure, although technically is not able to hold any political office due to his corruption-related convictions last year.
Well, Ms Paetongtarn is only 37 years old. She'll become the youngest premier in the country ever. She's never served in government before. How do you think she'll do?
Well, people are betting that Thaksin will, her father will tell her what to do, right? So I think we should rest assured that she has a very experienced advisor, and that's for one thing. Second thing, I'm just trying to give her some benefits of the doubt. I mean, as a leader of the ruling Pheu Thai party over the past year or so, she has been doing not a too bad job, pulling all the party members together, presenting a united front. But of course, as you have said, she's really an unknown quantity, but with a very experienced person just behind her.
And do you think she'll have the support of the people?
Well, Thailand is divided. It depends on who you ask. If you are a supporter of Thaksin, she has over 100% of support. She's seen as a direct political medium of Thaksin. Some look at this as a new Thaksin administration. But, if you are on the other side, just like the American politics, then, anything that has to do with Thaksin and Paetongtarn is basically perceived as corrupt, as evil, as something undesirable. So Thailand is split. We have a very strong, and hugely popular main opposition party, which basically was dissolved and emerged as a new party last week.
So overall, how significant is this development that Thailand now has another Prime Minister within the Shinawatra family?
One must point out that this is a different Shinawatra administration, simply because the party have, over the past year and a half, decided to strike a truce between the party and the royalist established elite. So within the new coalition, which is just a continuation of the past administration, or the previous administration, there are two pro-military parties within the coalitions. Now the new enemy of the established elites is less the Pheu Thai or the Shinawatra clan, but more of the main opposition party, which used to be known until last week as the Move Forward Party, but is now known as People's Party.
Well, Pravit, we look forward to seeing what happens in Thai politics. It's always somewhat unpredictable. Thank you so much for joining us on Asia Newsweek.
My pleasure, Yvonne.
Across India, protesters are outraged over the rape and murder of a young woman in West Bengal's Kolkata. Her body was found in a state-run hospital where she was a resident doctor. Hundreds of thousands of people from Delhi to Kolkata have gathered, holding candles and marching through the night. Many government hospitals have suspended all services except in emergency departments as health workers demand justice for their colleague.
Justice! Justice! Chanting for justice and calling out silence as violence. Hospital staff in several cities across India are protesting after a 31-year-old doctor was found dead on Friday. Many held CBI signs calling for the criminal investigation to be transferred to India's Federal Police, the Central Bureau of Investigation.
We want a fair inquiry and demand Central Bureau of Investigation intervention. We're demanding strict action against authorities who tried to conceal evidence related to the case.
Police said the trainee doctor had been raped and murdered at a government-run hospital. A police volunteer was later arrested in connection with the crime.
We are rather thankful and grateful to the Honourable Court that the CBI has been now handed over the investigation.
Hospital services were disrupted in several cities as doctors walked off the job and protests spread nationwide.
We will keep protesting until our demands are met. The main demands are there must be a Central Bureau of Investigation probe into the matter, as regional officials are not paying attention to the incident. The Central Protection Act must be mandated and the real culprits must be arrested.
More than 8,000 government doctors have protested in Maharashtra state alone.
We have ensured that patients don't face inconvenience due to the protest. Around 100 doctors are here, but all emergency services and outpatient departments are staffed by at least 200 doctors who are not at this protest.
Doctors in India have long complained of often squalid government hospitals and being overworked and underpaid. But they now say threats of violence from angry family members of patients is an additional threat and they need more protection. Around 75% of doctors in India have faced some form of violence, according to the Indian Medical Association. Libby Hogan, ABC News.
It's been more than a week since Bangladesh's interim leader Muhammad Yunus was sworn in. It was meant to restore calm after deadly protests rocked the country, eventually leading to the resignation of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. But the interim government is yet to announce when free and fair elections will be held. For more on this, I'm joined by reporter Hannah Joes. Hannah, are there signs stability is on the way for Bangladesh?
Hi, Yvonne. Well, the Muhammad Yunus government has been responsive. It is still early days, so you can only go by these early indicators. But so far, it's been quite responsive. It's been meeting with students. It's been meeting with minority communities who have concerns. He's even included student leaders in his interim government. And he was, of course, the pick. He was chosen by student leaders even before it was clear Hasina was going to resign. He's a Nobel laureate academic. He has the students' trust, but the mood nonetheless about him is one of cautious hope. You know, Bangladesh is a country where there's been coups and military takeovers and martial law, fairly often. So there's a sense of disillusionment with politics in general and with all of the political parties. But he's promised to do two main things, which is he's promised that people who committed crimes under the Hasina government over the last few weeks would be tried. And he's also said that the glory of state institutions would be revived, the implication being that political corruption will be cleaned up. And we've already seen officials, judges who were there under the Hasina government resigning. But these goals it looks like they might take some time. And an interim government in normal circumstances is supposed to hold an election within about 3 months. But, there could be the argument that these aren't normal circumstances. And, what's happened in the past, a caretaker government like this could stay for as long as 2 years. But yeah, you're right. They haven't given any indication, despite being asked repeatedly by reporters in Dhaka, of when elections might be held.
And as we know, ousted Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina fled to India. Do we know what's next for her?
Well, it's interesting with Sheikh Hasina because her son, who was speaking for her after her resignation, he initially said that, she was feeling that neither she nor her family would ever return to Bangladesh. But, during the last week, her son kind of changed his stance on that and said that she would return when the interim government holds elections. And he said that, no election can really be held without the buy-in of her party, the Awami League, as the country's biggest and oldest party. But there's like an added complication, which is that Hasina is also being charged with murder for giving those shoot-at-sight orders to police against the protesters before she left Bangladesh. So that may complicate her plans to return, and it might not even be the last of such cases against her. But, when she left, the mood of the country was so palpably ecstatic, and it's still one of like deep relief. So it's difficult to imagine a situation in which she could peaceably return anytime in the near future.
And Hannah, since the upheaval, there have been further protests in Bangladesh by minority groups, in particular those from the Hindu community.
Yeah, so Hindus are the country's largest minority at 8% of the population, and in a Muslim majority country. And that's a figure that has been on the decline for decades. But last weekend, Hindus came out in thousands to protest in a couple of cities against the violence, threats, and intimidation they've been receiving when law and order broke down when the government fell. So I have spoken to Hindu Bangladeshis whose properties had been burnt, their belongings looted, threatened they'd be killed. They'd had to leave their homes and come back to, burnt gates and none of their clothes or belongings there anymore. And it's happened enough that, students have gone out in groups to protect the homes and neighborhoods and shops of the Hindus in their areas. And, there is an Islamist side of Bangladesh politics that is hostile to Hindus. There have been attacks on Hindus before during times of upheaval like this. But one, feeling that came out was that a lot of the Hindus I spoke to had themselves participated in those protests that ultimately dethroned Hasina. So they feel that they have risked so much for their country, and now they've been victimized with threats and intimidation and made to feel like they don't belong. And so on top of all that, on top of the actual violence, there is also misinformation going around. So exaggerated threats, fake news of attacks in areas where attacks haven't happened on Hindus, kind of scaring the people who live in that area. And it's really served to inflame tensions, and it'll be up to the interim government to, put a stop to it, which they've promised to do. They've also promised compensation for those affected by these attacks. So it at least seems like it's a responsive interim government.
Hannah Joes, thank you.
Thanks.
Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has announced he'll step down from the top job when the party meets to elect a new leader in September. His decision to not recontest comes after months of low approval ratings. North Asia correspondent James Oden reports.
Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party has lurched from one scandal to another. And in the eyes of many voters, the Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has simply not done enough to right the ship. His approval ratings have long been in the doldrums, with one poll showing approval of his cabinet was only at 15.5%. Other polls are around 25%. So with the party due to hold its scheduled leadership meeting next month, the PM has decided to pull the pin. He won't recontest for the party leadership. He'll step down as Prime Minister and give that job to whoever the party appoints as its new leader. What are some of the scandals that have hurt the Prime Minister? Well, perhaps the most damaging were revelations that senior members of his team had been for years failing to disclose political donations, and the money had been used on things like gifts and dinners. There's also the issue of the Unification Church, a group that many accuse of being a predatory cult. It was firmly put in the spotlight after the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. It was revealed the gunman allegedly told police his mother had given huge amounts of money to the church, effectively bankrupting the family, and he was angry at the links between Shinzo Abe, the party, and the church. And it was revealed, indeed, there were links between the party and the church, with senior politicians effectively using the church as a reliable voting bloc, or the members as a reliable voting bloc. There are broader issues at play too. The economy is slipping. It slipped from the third largest economy in the world to the fourth, and that slide is expected to continue. Many of these scandals weren't directly linked with Fumio Kishida. He was in many ways a clean skin, but really people just did not think he had the strong leadership that the country needed for now. So when he hands over the Prime Minister, the country will have a new Prime Minister until the general election is called, and that has to happen sometime by the end of October next year.
After a thrilling 2 weeks of Olympic action, athletes across Asia have returned home. Taiwan welcomed its champions with a group of fighter jets that could be seen from inside the athletes' plane. The Games saw the island's best performance yet, with a tally of 7 medals, including 2 golds. Meanwhile, the South Korean pistol shooter Kim Yeji, who became a social media sensation after looking too cool as she competed, touched down in Seoul. The silver medalist recreated her famous pose for the crowd as though holding a pistol with her hand casually resting in her pocket. But in other parts of Incheon Airport, some less desirable arrivals from the Paris Games have not received the same welcome. Last year, the French capital was gripped by a bedbug infestation that proved a nightmare for authorities to combat. And South Korea isn't taking any chances for the critters to surface alongside returning athletes and tourists.
Seko's nose is working overtime. The 2-year-old beagle has been deployed at the international airport in the capital, Seoul, to identify any bedbugs. He's the first and only dog in the country so far to be trained to detect the chemical released by bedbugs. Seko and his team were deployed last Friday as more athletes and officials started arriving home from Paris after the Olympics. Paris tackled an infestation last year by stepping up exterminations. Authorities created a dedicated task force to curb the critters and called on insurers to include bedbug cover in home insurance. Still, Seoul's airport isn't taking any chances.
It can be sensitive for travellers to have someone open their suitcases. There used to be a process where people visually inspect items, which could be cumbersome. But our bedbug sniffer dog Seko can detect bedbugs with just about 1/3 of the zipper on a suitcase opened by sniffing the air inside, which is a significant advantage.
South Korea went into a period of hysteria last year when suspected infestations were reported in apartments, motel rooms and a spa. Seko and his team are on alert to stop any critters from entering so that the focus can stay on the returning athletes. He is one dog with a lot of responsibility, but he's being looked after with generous breaks of 20 minutes sniffing, followed by 30 minutes rest. He's reporting for duty, working through until September 8th. Libby Hogan, ABC News.
A town in Thailand is battling to control rival gangs of marauding monkeys which have attacked people and forced some from their homes and businesses. Authorities are so worried they've begun arresting hundreds of the animals and sterilising them, but there's still no plan for where they'll be released. Southeast Asia correspondent Lauren Day reports from Lopburi.
The monkeys of Lopburi have long been a tourist attraction, but now they're turning some away.
I love the monkey, but monkey in Lopburi, monkey in here they are so hazardous. They are really make me so scary.
Even at the local school, the macaques are making a mess, harassing students, stealing phones and iPads, and even using their pool.
So like they swim in there, they pee in there, they poop in there. Anything that's so gross is all in there. So it's not for humans anymore. It's not for students. It's for them.
The city hosts an annual banquet for the monkeys, and tourists regularly ignore pleas not to feed them.
When monkeys are hungry, they snatch food from people who walk past. They are getting fiercer and more aggressive.
Tensions boiled over earlier this year when a woman dislocated her knee after she was kicked in the back by a monkey that wanted her food. In April, after growing complaints from residents, authorities hatched a plan to round up thousands of monkeys and put them in large enclosures. But no sooner had the arrests begun, about 30 monkeys escaped and stormed the police station. So police set up a special task force the media has dubbed the Anti-Monkey Unit.
We take care of both criminal cases and monkey cases. We do both our main job and monkey business.
So far, authorities have captured hundreds of macaques, but with no other province willing to take them, the Department of National Parks is still trying to work out where they'll go in the long term.
This is where about 1,200 of these monkeys are being held. Here they're being fed, sterilised and registered with tattoos so that authorities can identify them in the future.
The mayor says there are 6 different monkey gangs that fight, so they have to be kept separate. And there's a lot of hungry mouths to feed.
If we can capture another 3,000 after the cages are finished, altogether there will be 4,000 monkeys. How will we get budgets for it?
But the mayor is adamant he won't get rid of them all.
Lopburi must have monkeys. There is no other way.
Hey. Oh my God.
Lauren Day, ABC News, Lopburi.
And that is all we have time for. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next week.